Creating these classes requires equipment and services that cost money. If you appreciate this education, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and offering a one-time or monthly recurring donation. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class I'm going to be talking about how to get a job as a coder in the modern world. So, you've gone out there, you've gone through Code Academy, you've gone through a boot camp, maybe you've gone through college, maybe you've self-studied, watched some of my classes, and you feel confident and you feel like you know what is required in order to actually go out there and do coding in a professional setting, but the problem is how to get a job. One of the issues that we run into in this modern world is that getting a job as a coder can actually be shockingly easy. Understand, here at least in the Baltimore area, the coding unemployment rate is 2.8%. 2.8%. Basically means they hire every coder that they can find. So it can be shockingly easy to get a job as a coder. But one of the big problems that we run into is the process. The process required in order to get a job is a little bit more convoluted than it used to be, right? Back in the old days with me, when I got into traditional IT, you sent out resumes to everybody, every company you thought that might hire you. If they had an open position, they would interview the candidates and then they would slot whoever they thought was best for the position. One of the things you have to understand, though, is back in the old days, we were all using the same systems. So whether you were a DoD contractor, whether you were a hospital, whether you were an amusement park, you were using Microsoft Active Directory, you were using Cisco switches, you were basically more or less using the exact same equipment, exact same software. Things like antivirus software might be different, backup software, different companies like different backup software, but basically you were running Microsoft Active Directory. And so back then, when everybody basically used the exact same equipment, it was a lot easier to just do the resume interview process because, again, if you knew Active Directory, you could work for a hospital or a DoD contractor or a construction company or an amusement park, and it really didn't matter. All right, in the modern world, though, becoming a technology professional, when you're going to be going out, you're going to be dealing with much more diverse environments. And you're going to be building infrastructure from the ground up. So you're going to be responsible for everything from user interfaces to how reports are given to the CEOs and to the executives. So again, back in the old days, if I installed Windows XP on a client system, whether you're a DoD contractor or whether you were in the hospital, you were getting the exact same shell. You were getting the exact same user interface. In the coding world, though, if we're developing some kind of product for a DoD contractor or for a hospital, the user interface should be different for the different environments. Possibly a DoD contractor, these are all military type mindsets. They'll want something that's a little bit more precise, doesn't need all the fluff, doesn't need a lot of CSS, JavaScript, that kind of thing. In a hospital, maybe they need a nice color scheme. Maybe you need to pull out the color wheel and figure out the pastels and the nice things to keep those nurses calm when they type things into the system. One of the things that's important to understand is when you get hired for a coder, being a coder for a hospital is going to be different than being a coder for a DoD firm, which is going to be different than being a coder from a startup. So although you may know functions and loops and that type of thing, when people try to go out to get a job, it is going to be much more conversational than it used to be. So back in the old days, again, you sent resumes out, you got interviews, any MCSE will do. That's not the same nowadays, right? So it's very easy to get a job if you fit what these companies are looking for. But the way that you're going to get that job is going to be much more conversational now. You're going to go to meetups. You're going to go to tech events. You're going to talk with people you know. You're going to go and you're just going to simply have a beer. You're just going to shoot the crap and you're going to talk about the projects that you're doing. You're going to ask, the person across from you what they're up to. You're going to say, hey, I don't suppose you're hiring. They're going to say, hey, I don't suppose you want a job. And then it's this conversational process, right? That can be surprisingly easy, but it's a different way of doing things. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in this particular class. We're going to be talking about this modern way of how to get a coding job. Because again, like I said, in the Baltimore area, the coding unemployment rate is 2.8%. I was literally at a meetup last week of Microsoft developers, where the problem is funny. They were complaining about the quality of their staff, but they said they had to keep hiring that quality because that's all they could get. So again, like one of the things I try to bring to you folks is from the decision maker's perspective. You know, a lot of you folks are down, you're at the employee perspective, and so you think, the bosses tell us, if you're not perfect, they're not going to accept you. One of the funny things is being up with the decision makers, being up with the hiring people, and especially right now for coders, they're just like, oh my God, our people are so bad. They're so bad, but they're the only ones we can get. So this class, we're going to be talking about the process of getting a coding job today. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that I'm not going to be talking about getting a job with the FANGs. The FANGs. So when I talk about FANGs, these companies are Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google. So you'll hear this a lot. A lot of those folks out there, they're going to teach you how to get a job with FANGs. I'm not really even sure where Microsoft. What about Microsoft? Show Microsoft some love, right? But if you want to hear about that, you can find other content creators, other video creators out there are talking about how to get a job with FANGs, because that's cool and that's sexy and everybody wants a job with the FANGs. One of the things is, though, again, I know my audience. I know who I'm trying to talk to. And most likely if you're watching these videos, you're probably not going to be getting a job with the FANGs. Why I say that is not to disparage you, but remember, if you go to Facebook, interns start at $90,000 a year, right? Their mid-level coders are making $250,000 a year easily. The thing is, when you're Facebook, when you're Apple, when you're Netflix, when you're Google, when you have basically an unlimited bank account, you can hire the best of the best. And so if you can hire the best of the best, you're going to have a hiring process focused on hiring the best of the best. We can get into a discussion about whether they or not they actually get the best of the best at the end of the day, but you kind of know what I'm talking about here. So again, you go out there and you hear a lot of the other people talking about how to get a job with the FANGs, and they're going to talk about all these coding tests and all this crap that they have to go through. And the reality is those kind of major companies can put people through that because, again, they're paying interns $90,000 a year. But an important thing to understand is those are absolutely not the only jobs out there. They are absolutely not the only jobs on the table. And I think if you hyper-focus on those kind of massive companies, you're missing a hell of a lot of opportunity. Again, here in the Baltimore area, we have a surprising amount of small development shops. And so when I'm talking about development shops, I'm talking about 10-person companies that are sitting away, tippy-tapping out code for small companies, mid-sized companies, even components of things that larger companies are doing. So one of the important things to be thinking about is a lot of people, again, they're like, I want to be a coder, I want to work for Google. And honestly, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, do you really? Again, at this point in time, I'm not talking about back in 2000. Back in 2000, maybe. But now and going forward, these are massive companies. They're massive companies with their own bureaucracies, with their own massive processes, with their own things going on. And really, getting hired at Facebook or Google now may not actually even be what you think it's gonna be. Getting hired at a startup company with 20 employees that's really taking off into a new area of AI or machine learning or something that's actually very interesting may be much more fulfilling and even much more profitable at the end of the day. So just to be clear here, I'm not talking about the FANGs. If you're gonna browbeat me because I'm not talking about all these special coding tests and all this kind of crap that you have to jump through, not going to go there. Basically, I'm talking about a lot of the more standard companies that are out there, the development shops, the companies that right now really are looking for coders. So now let's take a moment and start talking about culture. So this is an important thing to understand when you're going to be going out there and getting a job in the modern coding world. Culture for these companies is massively important. Now, to be clear, if you watch some of the videos that I do for other projects, you will know the concept of startup culture and these technology company cultures can be massively problematic. So to be clear, here, I'm not talking about morals, I'm not talking about ethics, I'm not talking about what's right, nor am I talking what's wrong or good good or bad or otherwise. I'm just talking about what exists. And the fact of the matter is, most coding companies have a company culture, and it's very important to understand what's going on with that company culture and not try to overlook it. So again, in the old days, 20 years ago when I was getting a traditional IT job, you could slap an MCSE into any kind of company and it really didn't matter, whether it was an oil company or an amusement park or a florist shop, right? If you had an Active Directory server, an Active Directory server is, again, an Active Directory server. As long as you did the job and didn't piss anybody off, you're fine. The thing is, in this modern world, though, in this world where we're actually developing applications, we're developing the front end, we're developing the back end, we're developing the entire workflow for the company or for the industry that we're dealing with, things like culture matter much more because basically employers want to be able to hand job tasks off to employees and know the employee will do it more or less in the way expected by the person that's handing off the job. Now, this is important to understand. Again, back in the old days, if I'm installing a client operating system onto a computer, whether it's a DoD contractor, whether it's a florist, if I install Windows XP, DoD contractor is going to get a Windows XP screen, florist is going to get a Windows XP screen. Again, doesn't really matter. For a cultural fit isn't that important. But what's important to understand is if I'm in the coding world, if I'm in a development shop, and I say, I need you to create this user interface for our clients. I want some reported information to pop out. I want some input forms here so maybe they can do some searches, whatever else, right? I'm going to give you the overall concept. These are the functional things that this user interface needs to do, right? When I hand that off to you, I want, when it comes back, to know it's going to look more or less how I expected, right? If our company uses JavaScript, if our company does things certain ways, we use certain syntax, we use color schemes, whatever else, I want to know that if you present the finished user interface back to me, again, I'm going to have to do some proofreading, editing, I'll move this over here, change this color, that type of thing. But I want to know that it's going to more or less look like what I expected it to look. Again, one of the problems you get to in the coding world is you can code any way you want. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and there's 1,000 ways to build a user interface form. Again, functionally, you can have two user interface forms that are functionally identical and just a complete world apart in usability and everything else. One user interface, the client would accept off the bat. The other user interface, again, functional, but no secretary or no end user is actually going to use the thing because it's convoluted or whatever else, right? And so one of the things is when you go out there to try to get a job, there's going to be a lot of questions about your cultural fit. Not only that, but again, back in the old days, as a standard IT professional, there used to be the joke that we're all mushrooms, keep us in the dark and feed us every once in a while. It wasn't really the dark, it was fluorescent lit rooms. Oh, horrible fluorescent lit server rooms, but same concept, right? If I'm dealing with the Active Directory for a company, I don't really have to be great with the other people in the company. I mean, it's truly that's where there's kind of this mythology of the really nasty geek, the geek that doesn't care about what anybody thinks. Well, remember back in the old days, right? You'd have your morning meeting or maybe your weekly meeting. You sit down with the people that are involved. Let's say you're setting up your Active Directory, your security policies. So you say, okay, what security policies do the executives need? What security policies do warehouse people need? What security policies do the secretaries need? Whole nine yards. And then you take that and then you go to your server room or you go to your office and then you spend the next week setting up security policies, testing security, auditing security policies, verifying they do what the hell they're supposed to do. And then when you're done, you basically spit out the results or you put the results on the servers. And so like 2 hours of conversation with human beings may end up being 40 or 80 hours of actual work. And so you didn't necessarily need to have a lot of human relation skills, let's say. And one of the things in the modern world, especially with coding, when you're doing all this development, is that you're going to be interacting with a lot of different people that are part of the process when you're going to be building out anything. So you hear about front-end developers and back-end developers or possibly full-stack developers, right? A front-end developer is somebody who develops the front end that the users are going to be using, the user interface, the user experience. So the reports, the input forms, alerts, possibly notifications, that type of thing. That's that's the front end folks. That's what they're going to be focusing on. Then you have the back end folks. The back end folks, they're the ones that deal with the back end programming language, probably the database, that type of thing. PHP, Python, one of those back-end languages connected to a MySQL, MongoDB, whatever kind of database, and some kind of storage infrastructure, right? So even to build a simple application, you may have the front-end developer having to talk to the back-end developer. And again, and they have to actually be able to communicate in a way where things can get accomplished, right? So the front-end developer has to be able to pass the information in an appropriate way that the back-end developer can do something with it. The back-end developer has to pass information to the front-end developer in a format that the front-end developer can do something with it. So they actually have to communicate and they have to work together. Not only that, again, if you're working in a development company, you may have multiple front-end developers. Some front-end developers are dealing with a notification system. Some front-end developers are dealing with a reports system. Some are dealing with input forms, that type of thing. Back-end developers, again, we're dealing with the back-end developers. You may have the back-end developer that takes the information from the forms, puts it in the database. You may then have other back-end developers that once information is in the database, then they have scripts that go through and do something with that information. So you may have a lot of folks working on one single project, and they have to be able to communicate and work well together in a rather close environment. Let me tell you, you know one of the reasons I'm not a coder? Oh my God, you go to some of these development companies, the amount of room they give coders, I would be claustrophobic. I'm used to a server room. I'm used to me just strolling around some massive ass server room all by my lonesome. You get into some of these development shops. I've seen these development shops. They give their coders a 36-inch desk. And then there's another 36-inch desk. And then another 36-inch desk. Again, you gotta have the right personality for some of these companies. And so from a cultural standpoint, they want to make sure that you can all interact and get together and be able to work on projects well. Again, then you also have something called DevOps, so developer operations. So traditional IT is considered operations, developers are developers. So DevOps is when you smush developers and operations together. And so again, in the modern world, you're going to be developing code. You're going to be developing these projects. At some point, front end, back end, full stack developers, you all say, okay, this is good to go out to the end user. Basically, that's going to be handed over to the operations folks, the traditional IT folks. It's going to get deployed to the company, or hopefully it's going to be a test deployment to make sure the damn thing works properly. And then when it does weird things, then your operations folks are then going to come back to you as developers and say, look, these are the problems our users are running into. They need to be fixed. And then you need to have a big communication. So one of the big things to understand in the modern world, if you're going to go out there and be a coder, is that cultural fit is very important. Being able to sit down, that you're on the same page, that you're talking about the same things, that you're comfortable working 12 hours together. Again, like it or not, but the concept of working 12 hours together and then going to the bar for a couple of hours to have beer, that's a normal thing in the coding technology world now. And so you have to have people that actually like each other. Again, back in the old days of IT, I didn't like my partner back in the day. Not sure how much I should go into that. But let's say I had a partner back in the day that I did not appreciate. And you know what? I worked 8 hours and then I left. It wasn't that big a deal, right? Cultural fit wasn't the most important thing. Probably should have been more important than it was, but it wasn't the most important thing for the job to get done. But again, these modern things, if you're working 10 or 12 hours a day, literally right beside somebody, there's a cultural expectation that you're expected to go out to the bar and do some of the same things everybody else is doing, right? You need to be a good fit for that environment. So one of the things that you need to be thinking about is when you're going out to get a job now, think about it more from a conversational point of view. You're not going to be going out and doing formal interviews. You're going to be going out and you're going to be having conversations with people. You're going to be talking about a lot of things. Again, if you're sitting, so if you have a manager and there's you and you're sitting at the bar and you're having a couple of beers, you may talk about, hey, so, what coding language are you working with right now? It's like, oh, I'm doing Python, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, doing the other thing. But then it may range into, oh, have you seen, what's the latest movie that you've seen? Or do you follow the local football game? Or what are your other interests? One of the reasons that they're trying to figure this out is, again, to figure out that cultural fit. If everybody in the office is into Game of Thrones, or at this point hates the Game of Thrones, right? Having somebody that has the exact same feeling about Game of Thrones would actually be useful for the office. Oh, you hate what they did on season 8 too? Great, we all hate it. Come on in. You're going to be our new Python developer. Because what they're looking for there is they're looking for that you will be able to mesh with the rest of the people in the organization, and again, be able to come up to more or less the exact same decisions that other people in the organization will, that you'll be able to communicate well with other people in the organization, that things will be able to go as smoothly as possible as you're going out there and you're developing whatever it is that you're developing. Now let's talk about some of the work that you should actually be doing to make yourself look like a good candidate for anybody that's actually going out there trying to hire a new coder, or trying to hire a relatively inexperienced coder. The first thing that you need to be doing is you need to be working on projects on your own. This is very, very important in the coding world because basically one of the things that hiring folks are looking for is they're looking for people that are actually motivated to code. One of the big problems that we're running into in the modern technology world right now is everybody has heard that you get paid a lot of money and it's good job security and you get respect, and if you sign up for the right startup company, you might become a gazillionaire, right? So you have a lot of folks out there that have decided they want to be coders. I want the job of a coder, but they don't necessarily want the work of a coder. And this is a big problem in the real professional world. I've seen it in a lot of different areas where people want the title. They want the job title. They don't want the job work. And so one of the important things for you to be doing is you need to be doing projects on your own. Now, again, you may go out, and if you have friends or if you know anybody in things like nonprofit companies, NGOs, you could go out there and see what work that they may need. Maybe you could develop small little apps for your local nonprofits. So that's giving you something to do. Go out, startup companies. Oh, startup companies. I could have stories about startup companies. But, we put all these startup people on a pedestal. Let's bring them down to size. Remember, something like 58 out of 60 startups will fail. Let's talk about those 58. Let's talk about those 58. So you have a lot of startup founders out there that don't know how to code. They have an idea. They have a couple of bucks. They don't know how to code. Well, they might have a couple of dollars, so they don't have enough to hire somebody for $250,000 a year or whatever else, or $200 per hour. So if you go to them and you say, hey, again, you have a conversation, you have a beer, you have a coffee, whatever you want to have a drink of, and you say, oh, it's an interesting startup that you're doing. I think I know enough to actually be able to get a prototype off the ground for you, and then you would have something to show people. Can I build that prototype for you? And I don't know, maybe get a percent, 1% equity in your startup. To be clear, the startup's probably going to fail and that equity is most likely going to be worthless, but you're going to get experience. Beyond that, again, finding your own personal projects, finding projects that you can do that you personally find interesting. I know I went to a JavaScript meetup years ago, and what was really interesting is Baltimore City, in particular areas, there's a real problem with parking. Baltimore City is one of those weird cities where half of it is literally falling apart and nobody wants to go to it, and like 10% of it is just crowded with people. And so things like parking are a big problem in these small areas. So these small areas are getting over redeveloped. They're getting too many people in there. Those people have too many cars. And then Baltimore City needs a way to get revenue. And so they go out there and ticket everybody. So this guy was having a real problem with getting tickets. And so one of the things that he did is like he was thinking about it. And he said, well, I know just the fact of the matter, logistically, I'm going to have to continue parking in places where I might get a ticket. But how could I reduce the possibility that I would get a ticket? And so what he did is he actually created a little iPhone app to show whenever he goes to an area what streets he's least likely to get a ticket on. So think about this for a second, right? So he used, I think it was JavaScript, he used something in order to scrape. So Baltimore is part of this whole open governments initiative where they publish just a massive amount of their data sets. And so one of the things in their data sets is where tickets are written. So he was able to create a script that would parse all these places on where tickets are actually given. Then he created an iOS app, and that iOS app, that would show him, basically, it would geolocate, so it would show him where he was, and then it would show him the tickets, like how many tickets had been written on each of the streets, and so then he could find the street with the least number of tickets on it. Because again, one of the things you have to think about in the real world of human beings is people who write tickets, they have their patterns, they have their routines, they have the streets they like to walk down, the streets they don't like to walk down. So again, in some place like a city, you may have a street that for whatever reason traffic enforcement doesn't like to go down that street. It's just not their street. And again, they're writing a whole bunch of tickets, so it doesn't matter anyway. So one of the things he was able to do is he was able to create this app to show him the best place to park, the places where he was least likely to get a ticket. Now, this may seem like a joke, but think about all the technology that was required and all the coding that was required in order to create that app. So again, he had to create the iOS app. He had to create there was a JavaScript, because of the JavaScript meetup. There was some kind of JavaScript component to it. He had a component to actually be able to parse that open governments, the data sets, the whole 9 yards, and then he packaged it into an iOS app. Is that something you could necessarily sell? Who knows? Would he sell it? Maybe he might get a couple of bucks. Is it for a company or anything else? No. But you know what that shows? What that shows is he was able to see a problem. He was able to come up with a solution for the problem, and then he was able to implement the problem. And that's one of the big things that hiring managers are looking for, because a big problem that they're running into is that people technically know how to code. They know loops, they know variables, they know if-else statements or whatever else, but they hand them a task. Okay, we need a user interface for our users to interact with this platform. And what they want to say is, build me user interface. This user interface needs X, Y, or Z. Go build. And one of the problems they run into is a lot of folks are like, well, I don't know, should this be on top or should this be on bottom? Should I do it this way or should I do it this? Should I do? And they're like, that's not why I hired you. I hired you, give you tasks, come back with results. That's what I want. So if you actually go out there and you're developing things, that shows that you have the motivation, you have, the way to see problems, to see solutions for problems, and actually to be able to implement solutions for problems. It's also very important in the coding world, because remember, you may be building things from the ground up. And the fact of the matter is that humans are fallible. Even your senior coders, these senior coders, they've been coding for 4 years. Since you've been in high school, they've been coding, right? Joke, sort of. But anyway, but the fact of the matter is, if you're building something from the ground up, something might get overlooked. Some kind of backup solution, some kind of security solution, possibly some kind of reporting solution that might be very valuable. So if you're somebody on the team and you're building this thing, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, we're collecting this information? Well, I was having a beer with human resources. I was having a beer with the PR department a couple of days ago, and they were saying they need this kind of information. So we're actually collecting this information. So if I created a dashboard that provided that to the PR, the HR, the whatever else, that would be very valuable to them. And so if you have some downtime and you just sit there and you whip up a little model, you whip up a little prototype, and then you go to your boss and you say, hey, I was talking with the PR folks the other day. They were saying they needed a dashboard that was able to pull certain information. I realized we were pulling that we were already collecting that information in the database. So I took about an hour yesterday. I came up with this little dashboard. I think this will give these folks everything that they need. Can I go ahead with this? Right, that's the kind of thing that's valuable. Wait a minute, you mean you were communicating with other departments, you were listening to what the user issues were, you then saw that there might be a solution to those user issues, you then created a prototype or model to prove that this could actually happen, and you're coming to me saying, can I finish this? Yes, that's what hiring people want. So those are some of the important things to be thinking about. Also, one of the big things is when you sit down and you start having conversations with people, the fact that you know the words, you know the glossary terminology. Again, when you start building this modern world, you're going to have Azure, you're going to have cloud functions, you're going to have Azure functions. So cloud functions, basically something called serverless architecture. Serverless architecture is where you can connect to compute up on the cloud for things like machine learning, machine vision, all kinds of fancy stuff, right? But it's important to understand. So there's serverless architecture, and then the generic term for what that serverless architecture is providing is something called cloud functions. That's a generic term, but of course, when you're dealing with companies, they've always got to put their own trademark on it. And so in the Azure world, cloud functions are called Azure functions. So if you're going and you're playing around and you're working with things and you're doing your research and you're trying to figure out how to make your little projects work, you're going to go out there and you're going to find Azure. Microsoft calls Azure cloud functions Azure functions. So when you're sitting there having a conversation with the hiring manager or the executive or whatever else, and they start talking about, how they're really interested in Azure functions, right? The less amount of time that you have to stop the conversation or you're confused by glossary terms, the better, right? So if they start rattling off, we're looking at Azure functions, we're trying to determine whether we should use C# or we think we already have institutional knowledge in Python, so maybe we'll go along with Python, right? If that hiring person can just start talking about that type of thing and you can follow along. Again, I'm not telling you that you have to understand the classes and methods and the exact API calls. The fact that they can talk about that kind of stuff and you can just follow along with them, that will make life a lot better for you, because then they'll go, oh, okay, so this person is actually up to date. They don't just know if else loops, they also know all of these other technologies. Again, if they're sitting there and you're talking about Twilio. And so Twilio is a kind of a notifications, SMS, VoIP, that kind of thing. And you sit there and they start talking about the APIs, and they may say something like, it's too bad because, our legacy infrastructure, we're using PHP. We'd really like to use Twilio, but, to use Twilio, they've got Python APIs. If you can just say, hey, are you sure about that? I think with Python 7, Twilio opened up their APIs to Python. Now, don't quote me. I don't force me to code it tomorrow. But I'm pretty sure I was looking at Twilio the other day in order to create a notification system for this project that I'm doing, and I saw when I was looking at the different languages, one of the things that I was surprised about is I do think they actually support PHP. Oh, they support PHP. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Here, let's wait. What service are you using? See, as of PHP 7, Twilio supports PHP. Right, think about that. Think about how comfortable that's going to be for the hiring process versus somebody that goes, yes, I know APIs, I know loops, so on and so forth. Now with that, one of the things you need to be thinking about, again, a very important thing, is getting an account with GitHub and actually uploading to GitHub. So GitHub is a repository for coding projects. So a lot of people, especially if they're new, especially if they're just learning, self-learning or whatever else, they may not think GitHub is important. Let me tell you, I have talked with many recruiters. I have talked with many hiring people. And one of the things they say is the first thing that they do is they look up the person's user account on GitHub. They say, I take a look at GitHub. So when I start talking about GitHub, realize this isn't just some half thing. Oh, maybe you should do GitHub. Every person that hires coders that I've talked to basically say the first thing that they do is they go and they look up the person's GitHub account and see what they've been up to. So when you're doing your projects, one of the things that you should be looking at is actually uploading your code that you've created to GitHub, as long as it's open and available. So again, if you're working with a nonprofit organization, maybe you're coming up with some kind of notification system for, donations or whatever else. Again, as long as it's open, don't don't upload the tables. Do not upload the user tables, to be clear. But all the code that makes that work, you could upload that to GitHub. Then other people can see that and use that if necessary. But it also shows hiring managers that you're actually like doing something. Again, actually doing work. One of the big things in the real world of hiring people is the whole question of how do I know if you're doing something, or how do I know if you're just blowing smoke up my butt, right? Anybody can talk. Anybody can talk. I can talk about all the amazing things that I'm doing. But how does a hiring person know that you're actually doing anything? One of the ways that they can know that you're doing something is by going to GitHub and see what you've uploaded. So with that, let's go over and take a look at GitHub. So this is just GitHub. You go to github.com. It is now officially owned by Microsoft. You can set up an account for free. So if you go here, there are different plans. If you look at pricing, so free, the one that you're probably going to want is the free one. Gives you repositories, private repositories. Gives you more than enough for your own private things. Again, if you want to go up to the pro version, that's up to you, but free should be good. When you come on here, there's a lots of different things you can take a look at. So if you go, so you go back, you go to Explore. There's different topics, there's different collections, all kinds of different code. Again, code on things you may not be thinking about. Flask. Flask is a web framework for Python, Haskell, these types of things. You can click on here and you can see the different things that people are up to. So there's the different repositories for Flask. Again, I've never actually used Flask. Things that you might be interested in taking a look at. There's code and all that here. With this, you do get a user account, and with the user account, people can actually see what you're up to. So I clicked on this particular user account, and so with this user account, we can see this person, Pierre Krieger out of Berlin, Germany. He's got his website, or you can put a website here, you put a LinkedIn account here, something like that. Oops, nope, didn't want to do that. Then beyond this, it shows all of his contributions. That's a lot of contributions. So it shows all the contributions, it shows repositories that he's dealing with, shows the packages that he's dealing with, shows stars, shows followers, all that kind of thing. And so this is very big in the hiring world for coders. So somebody can come here and see what you're up to. Obviously, you're probably not going to be doing 2,500 contributions in a year, but if they come here and they see that you're actually active, that you're actually doing something, that will then prove to them that you are somebody that they might be interested in. Now, a big question, I've been talking about this whole culture, I've been talking about the whole conversation thing, getting stuff on GitHub, but then it's one of the big problems with a lot of folks is, yeah, but how do I actually meet people? Yeah, I get the whole culture thing, Eli. I get the whole conversation thing, but I'm not actually around a lot of people, so how do I actually get in front of people to have one of those conversations? What I would argue is one of the best resources right now, frankly, is Meetup, even still. So let's be honest, the height of Meetup's popularity is probably somewhere between 2012 to 2014. It has been on a downhill slide ever since, but just because it's on a downhill slide does not mean it's worthless. There are many tech events that are put up, that are posted onto Meetup. They are generally free to attend. They generally have free food. They may have free beer, and they're good places to go. And basically, you can learn about new tech topics, and you can actually go and you can talk with people and see what people are interested in. Again, you go to something like a Meetup and you just start shaking people's hand and go, hey, I'm looking for a job. Hey, I'm looking for a job. Hey, you know anybody that has a job? Right? You would be surprised. I know when I sit here and I say something like that, that sounds obnoxious as hell, but obnoxious works. Obnoxious works. And to be honest with you, again, I've started going to meetups again just for my own education. There's some interesting meetups here in the Baltimore area. And I swear to you, every single meetup I go to, coding employment is like the number one subject. It's a subject that comes up again and again and again. I went to a machine vision AI meetup, had 150 people in the room, and literally the person who did the meetup, there are all these sponsors, so there's these sponsors for the meetup, and so the person, like literally, he stood in the front, he said, I want everybody here to know all the sponsors are hiring. Every single sponsor is hiring. Again, I went to a meetup last week. I was there, again, decision makers, old school senior developers. They were sitting there literally complaining about the quality of the coders they were dealing with. And they were all laughing because there were no noobs in the room. They were all laughing because the fact is the coding unemployment rate in our area is 2.8%. So they're in that place of they don't like the people they're hiring, but they're the only people that they can hire, right? And so if you go to these meetups, it can be a very useful place to go, start having conversations, start talking with people, again, seeing what technology is important in your area, what people are actually hiring for, what languages make more or less. You may be surprised in your area. Some languages make more than you may think. Some languages make less than you think. You can see what in your geographic area is actually in demand, so on and so forth. Not only that, but frankly, a lot of the meetups nowadays are actually created by coding companies that are looking for candidates. Again, I cannot state strongly enough how hot the coding market is right now. And so there are a lot of these development shops out there. Literally what they do is they create meetups, they pay for the food, they pay for the beer, they pay for everything. The reason that they do it is they're just trying to get people through the door, not to get jobs. They're not looking for clients. They've already got enough clients. They're looking for people, for employee type people to come in, learn about their company, and then possibly be able to get to hire them in the future. So meetups are a huge thing. With that, let's go over to the computer just for a moment so I can show you the meetups in our particular area just to give you an idea of what's going on. So here we are at Meetup. Again, it's just meetup.com. You can create an account for free. So it costs the event organizers money, but it doesn't cost the attendees anything unless the event organizers say that it does. So most of these events are free. But we can go here, we can type in tech, 25 miles of Baltimore, and we can see what's going on. Baltimore Code and Coffee at Spark, they got 28 members going. Women in Agile. So if you're a woman, Agile games for everybody. They have 14 people going. Robotics, it's got some interesting things going on here. Robotics research, autonomous systems, and the Army Research Lab and AI integration. I actually think I'm going to this particular one. You go here, you open it up. Oh, and we get to see, this PhD scientist talking about what's going on. Doors open at 6 p.m. for networking and refreshments, courtesy of sponsor. Starts at 6:30, and you can see like this particular meetup has 54 people going. So again, you go, you grab some food, you grab a beer, you find a couple of people to talk to, and you just have a conversation. If you're into Splunk, if that's your thing, there's Splunk. If you're data science, that's your thing. They have a happy hour going on, 27 members. Our Ladies of Baltimore, they got 57 members going on Wednesday. Black Techie Speaker Night, they got 22 members going to that. Applying Agile and DevOps principles, they got 49 members going to that. And again, what you have to understand to get a job is you don't need 1,000 people going to these events, right? If you have 50 people going to these events, you can just go there, you start to have a conversation with a few people, and you would be surprised how far you can get. Now, for me, unless I really care about the topic, I'm probably not going to go to something with 5 people. If it says 5 people, it probably means only 2 people are going to show up. So, that's a little creepy. I'm not going to go to something with 5 people. But, if you got something, topic web app pen testing, right? You got 21 people going to that. They say they have 21 people going. Probably 10 will actually show up. And 10's actually a nice little group for a meetup. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of different things. Python for city government process, game dev meetup, preparing for your interview, secure Mule APIs. And again, this is a good way you can go. You can learn about technology, you can meet people, you can have conversations, so on and so forth. Now, I've been talking a lot about grabbing a beer with somebody, or maybe grabbing a coffee, or grabbing a juice, grabbing a liquid of some sort with somebody. And so this is an important thing to understand in the modern world of technology, especially if you're going to try to go out there and get a job, is the idea of grabbing a beer with somebody is a very significant thing. Again, we're not looking necessarily for really highly formal interviews for many of these hiring processes. Basically, folks are looking for people that they can deal with, that they feel that they have the skill sets for what their company and their projects needs, and that they can onboard as quickly as possible. So one of the things to be thinking about, again, when you go to meetups, when you go to tech events, that type of thing, if you find somebody that's interested, you find somebody that's doing the type of job that you want to be a Python developer that's dealing with machine learning, machine vision, whatever else, you go to one of these AI meetups, you find somebody that basically has the job that you want. One of the things you can do, legit, completely 100% legit, A-OK, is you can say, hey, I don't suppose, could I, again, this is the selfless world. We're doing for others. Can I buy you a beer or buy you a coffee and pick your brain? I've been working with Python. I've been working with some of the Azure functions using their machine learning, machine vision. I haven't been able to talk to a lot of other folks in the field. I would love to be able to buy you a beer, maybe buy you a meal, and get your idea of what your thoughts are in the industry. And the cool part is, many times people say, yeah, again, free beer. It's amazing. It's weird. Can I tell you something weird about the tech world? You can literally have people making $500,000 a year that will not pass up free beer. I don't know what it is. It's a mindset thing. These people are making $500,000 a year, and you offer them free beer, and it's like catnip. Free? It's the funniest thing in the world. I go to some of these tech events and things, and there'll be afterwards, after the tech event is over, maybe the sponsor or whatever will have some beer, but then there'll be a local bar, and so the local bar will have good beer, have good alcohol, and have good food, but then the sponsor will be basically offering Pabst, and you'll see these people making serious money, and they're drinking Pabst. And I'm like, hey, why don't we go to the bar right there and we can get some good beer? Well, that's gonna be $7 a pint. You make $500,000 a year. Free beer, free coffee, free food. You will be shocked. People, that should be well out of who you should be able to get a conversation with. Many times, you offer them free beer, free food, they will go for it. So it's something, when you go to the meetups, when you go to tech events, when you go to the other things, just think about when you walk up to somebody, if again, maybe they're a company you're interested in working for. Again, even if they're not the hiring person, right? Even if they're just a coder for the company. Oh, you work for X, Y, or Z. I've really been interested in that company. I've heard good things. Hey, can I buy you a beer and pick your brain about how I could get a job with a company? Because one of the things that you may not realize, especially if you're new, is a lot of times people that work for companies will actually get recruiting bonuses if they can bring people into the company, right? So if I go to a meetup and I'm working for a company, somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I do X, Y, or Z. I'm really interested in working for your company. Can I buy you a free beer? See, you wanting to be employed are like, oh, I hope this person will accept my free beer. Right? That person you're talking to may be sitting there going, so let's see, so I get a free beer, and if this person actually knows anything, I might actually get a $5,000 bonus for bringing them in. Well, I guess I can fit you in. That's the real world. That's the real world, right? So go and talk with people. And again, like I say, offer the beer, offer the coffee, on you, and then see how it goes. Sometimes you'll be surprised. Sometimes they will buy, if they are excited, they're happy, they'll actually buy you the beer or the food. The other thing to be thinking about is asking for informational interviews. So first is you go to meetups, you meet people are interested in, you go beer, coffee, whatever else. Again, one of the other things you should be thinking about though is something called an informational interview. So an informational interview is not like a normal job interview. A normal job interview is there is a position that is open, you're going for that position. An informational interview is where you go to a company and you say, I just want to know more about your company. I'm doing X, Y, or Z. I've heard your company is very good. I know some people that work for your company. I'm interested in seeing what opportunities you have. Can I come in and basically do an informational interview? This, again, is going to be something that many companies are going to snap up, especially if you seem to have at least any kind of value at all. Because one of the problems that these development companies are dealing with is sometimes it's very hard to put a title on a particular job, right? And talk about the the particular coding languages that may be needed, or particular technologies that may be needed, right? So whenever you're going to be designing any kind of application, the fact of the matter is you could probably use 4 different languages to design the exact same application, right? You use 4 different languages, the end user results would be the same, the reliability would be the same, everything would be the same. Java, C#, this or that or the other. So a lot of times, one of the problems that you run into with the hiring process is you have work that needs to be done. It can be done in 20 different ways. It just needs to get done. But in the normal world, the manager has to go to the HR person and describe the specific job and the specific skill sets. And this is where you get really messy, really nasty, evil-looking job descriptions. Because again, imagine if you have to complete some type of task, and there's 20 ways to complete that task, and you could use 3 different languages to complete that task, and there's a whole, how do you put that into a job description? What's a hell of a lot easier if you have a motivated, excited person that actually knows what's going on. They plop themselves in a seat for an informational interview, and they say, hey, yeah, so this is where I'm coming from, this is what I'm looking at. I've taken the effort to actually learn about your company, and so I'm trying to figure out how to make myself the best person for a possible job opening. And then the hiring person goes, "Oh, yeah. So what do you know? So funny that." Python, JavaScript, we're not using MySQL, but Python and JavaScript. I tell you what, let me talk to a couple of people. We might actually need somebody that knows your skill sets. So one of the things to think about is calling up companies that you're interested in and asking if they will do an informational interview. Hi, I've heard about your company. Again, I go into these meetups, everything else. I was talking with your employee. They're very happy. Again, name drop. This particular employee is very happy with your company. I would really like to work in that type of environment. Is there any way I could do an informational interview, learn more about your company, learn more about what you actually need to see where I might be able to fit in? And you would be surprised. Again, a lot of these companies will say yes to that, because one thing too is you've got to think about with these coding companies is companies poach from each other, and they think of employment from a long view. And so you come in for an informational interview, and it honestly may be a bust for them, right? It might be, they do C#, Python. They don't care about Python. But if you go in and you see their cool offices, and you see the happy employees, and then you're dealing with somebody that's really interested in you, right? A year from now or 2 years from now, when they actually have, some job that requires Python, and they're going through and they're doing a more formal interview process, right? If they're interested in you, and you come back and you're like, oh, wow. Well, I remember this place. Oh, funny story. The first informational interview I did it here. Yeah, you guys were great. Went out with lunch later. Oh, it was a good old time. Yeah, it's too bad. I didn't have the skill set back then, obviously. But yeah, I've always had a special place in my heart for this place, right? That is incredibly valuable for these companies, and that's one of the reasons why many times they'll be happy to do things like informational interviews to tell you about the company. Even if you're not a fit now, you may be a fit later, and it's a good way for them to do public relations. And again, you may leave that informational interview, talk with your friend, right? Because again, you may be learning Python, they may be learning C#. You leave from the informational interview, you go drink a beer with your buddy, going, it's too bad, man, such a nice place. Oh, I really want to work there. Crap, they need the C# developers. I just don't need C#. And your buddy is like, what? They need C# developers? So really nice, you say. Do you still have that number? Right? And again, remember, 2.8% unemployment. These HR folks would be very happy if you call them up. So this is one of the things to be thinking about beyond the meetups and the tech events and that type of thing. Actually think about calling the companies that you're interested in and trying to get these informational interviews. So there you go. There are some thoughts on how to get a job in the modern world of coding and as a programmer. Again, with an unemployment rate in the coding world of 2.8%, at least in our area, there are a lot of jobs out there, and you don't necessarily have to be as good as you think you do, right? You don't have to be Bill Gates to actually get a pretty good salary anymore. You do have to know some coding language. Again, you got to go out there, you got to learn a coding language. You got to be working on projects, whether they're personal projects for yourself, whether they're projects for nonprofits, whether they're projects for startups. Hopefully, they're projects for somebody that's going to be paying you. You do have to be doing work. You should be posting as much work as possible. Again, be careful with like non-disclosure agreements and all that kind of stuff. Be careful with it, but you should be posting that work to GitHub, and then you should be going out to meetups, talking with people, doing informational interviews, and again, having conversations. In the coding world, it's not like that old-fashioned world of, here is my resume. Oh, thank you. Let us do an interview now, right? That's not how it works for a lot of these companies. Again, you go, you have a couple of beers, they're like, oh crap, you know this language? Yeah. How well do you know this language? Well, I just did this project. Oh, you did that project? Yeah. Here's the thing. We need somebody that can do that level of work, right? That's really how a lot of things work. Again, this may not be with the FANGs, the Facebooks, the Apple, the Netflix, the Googles, the M's, the Microsofts, these other companies in the world, Salesforce or whatever else. Again, when you can hire interns at $90,000 a year, that just puts everything into a whole different level. And if you're interested in that, again, there are a lot of people that do videos and classes and that type of thing. I'm talking about the folks, folks trying to get that $100,000 to $200,000 a year job after a few years. That's more what I'm talking about here. And again, what I would argue for a lot of people is, I think a lot of people don't want to work for Google. Again, if you look at Google, if you look at Facebook, if you look at some of these companies, there's the idea of working for those companies, but that idea you have may be 20 years old. Getting a job at Google 20 years ago may be an entirely different experience than getting a job at Google now. You get a job with some small development company, 10 or 20 people, they're working on machine vision or AI or whatever else. You may get a lot better experience. You may have a lot better work environment, and you may actually end up making more money at the end of the day than going with what you think might be the better way to go. So I will just put that out there. Again, in the coding world and all that, it's about conversations, it's about culture. So make sure, even while you're learning, if all you've got is a dummies book, if you're still at the dummies level, you should still be going to a couple of meetups per week. I would argue if you're really trying to get a job, you're trying to get in the field, you should be going to 2 meetups per week. Just find 2 that seem interesting and go. And then when you do go, don't hold up the wall. Don't be in the back of the room. When you go to the meetups, I'm not telling you to pass out 1,000 business cards. No, that's stupid. When you go to the meetups, what I want you to do is, your only job is to have a real conversation with one person. Not 5, not 10, not 100. I want you to have a conversation with one person. Find out what they do. Find out whether or not they like the company they work for. Find out where they think their little field of technology is going. Share whatever information they're interested in you, and go from there. If you actually have a conversation with one person per meetup, you do that 2 times per week. In a month, that's 8 people. In 2 months, that's 16 people. By the time you actually know a programming language to the point that you can be hired, that means you will have had a conversation with probably like 40 people. Out of those 40 people you've had conversations with, you will probably have a number of times going out with beer or coffee or whatever later, and that actually gives you a check. One of the big problems, again, in the coding world, in the IT world, is everybody has this idea, again, like with self-study. I'm going to study 16 hours a day. No, you're not. You're just not. If you try to study 16 hours a day, you're most likely going to burn out, and then you're going to give up, and it's going to be over. Again, the same is true with these meetups. I'm gonna meet everybody in the room. No, if you try to meet everybody in the room, then what do? You're just stabbing people with business. I've had that. I have a joke about that, with people trying to stab me with business cards. Business card, and it's just like, what's the point? I've literally had people walk up, hand me a business card, and walk away. I'm like, what do I do with this? Literally, what do I do with this? Whereas if sitting with a beer or pizza, you start to, oh, this is nice. Hey, so what are you trying to get out of this particular meetup? Oh, that's interesting. So is that what you work on with your company? Oh no, that's just right. If you have a conversation, one conversation per meetup is going to do you a hell of a lot better than just like throwing out the business cards and people are like, what do I do with this thing? So those are some things to think about. With that, as always, I enjoyed doing this class. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Apparently, the type of content you just saw is not what Susan W. wants for the future of YouTube. This means that recommendations by YouTube to this channel have dropped massively and views are becoming comically small. I hate to ask. I used to say I would never ask, but if you could subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, share the videos that you appreciate, that may help slow the death of this channel. Do remember that if anything at all happens to this channel, you can go to EliTheComputerGuy.com to view the content and access information not available on YouTube.